The emergency klaxon screamed through the depths of Facility Omega-7, their wail echoing off corroded metal walls that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. Commander Rafe Volkov pressed his palm against the biometric scanner, his weathered fingers trembling as the blast door groaned open to reveal rows upon rows of cryogenic pods, stretching into the shadows. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Luna defense grid," reported Lieutenant Kesmero, her voice cracking through the calm. "The Hegemony's advanced fleet just glassed Europa Station. 12 million dead in 30 seconds. Volkov's jaw clenched as he stepped into the chamber, his boots echoing in the vast space. The air tasted of recycled oxygen and desperation. Above them, Earth's last remaining orbital platforms were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that had swept across the galaxy like a plague, consuming entire star systems. The Vrex hegemony had given humanity one ultimatum: surrender and serve, or face extinction. Earth's combined fleets had lasted exactly 4 hours against their vanguard. "How many pods are still active?" Volkov asked, scanning the endless rows of frosted glass containers. 17,000, sir. But most are civilians colonists meant for the Kepler missions that never launched. A few hundred military personnel from the old Titan Wars. Volkov stopped before a pod marked with faded warning labels. Inside, barely visible through the ice crystal buildup, lay a woman with silver hair and scars across her neck. The nameplate read, Dr. Lyra Ashworth, Project Nightfall, classification Umbral. "What about this one?" Merrow's fingers danced across her tablet, pulling up records that made her face pale. "Sir, that's Dr. Ashworth. She was part of the Nightfall program before it was shut down. The files are heavily redacted, but she swallowed hard. She's been in there for 73 years. Why? The few records I can access mention something called psychological restructuring and tactical augmentation beyond ethical parameters. Sir, she was forgotten. Her pod was supposed to be terminated after the program ended, but the order never came through." The facility shuddered as another orbital platform died above them. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the roar-like flashes of the dying defense grid painting the sky in violent greens and purples. "The Vrex main fleet will reach Earth in 18 hours, Volkov said, his voice hollow. "Our remaining forces won't last 18 minutes against them, sir. I'm not sure waking her is. Show me her military record." Merrow's tablet flickered. "With classified documents, Lieutenant Colonel Lyra Ashworth, 12th Shock Division. 13 major engagements during the Outer Rim Wars. Tactical innovation rating, exceptional. Casualty ratio for 7T01. But sir, the psychological evaluations after Kepler for 2B. They're disturbing." Volkov read the fragments of text that hadn't been blacked out. "Demonstrates unprecedented tactical adaptation. Shows concerning disregard for conventional rules of engagement. Recommended for immediate psychological intervention after the Meridian incident. Exhibits signs of developing combat methodologies that exceed acceptable parameters." Another shudder ran through the facility. The lights flickered. "Commander, we're detecting massive energy signatures in the outer system. The hegemony's bringing something big." Volkov stared at the woman in the pod. Her peaceful expression gave no hint of what lay beneath. The Nightfall program had been humanity's darkest military experiment and attempt to create perfect soldiers by stripping away everything that made them human. "What happened on Kepler for 4B?" he asked. "The records are sealed, but 300,000 Vrex died, their entire occupation force. She was the only human survivor." The commander's hand hovered over the emergency revival controls. Outside, Earth's children were dying in the void, their screams lost in the vacuum. The Vrex had conquered 4 to 7 worlds, enslaving or exterminating their populations. They had never faced defeat. "Sir, her psychological profile indicates severe, Lieutenant. In 18 hours, everyone on this planet will be dead or enslaved. The Vrex don't take prisoners, and they don't show mercy." Volkov's finger moved to the activation switch. "Maybe it's time we reminded the galaxy what happens when you corner a human. But sir, the risk is extinction." His finger pressed down. "Wake her up." The cryogenic systems hummed to life with a sound like distant thunder. Inside the pod, automated systems began the delicate process of bringing Dr. Lyra Ashworth back from her 73-year sleep. Ice crystals melted and ran down the glass as her body temperature slowly climbed toward viability. As the revival process began, Volkov couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to unleash something that would change the nature of war itself. The question was whether Earth would survive what came next. The pod seal broke with a hydraulic hiss. That seemed to cut through the facility's emergency lighting like a blade. Dr. Lyra Ashworth sat up slowly, her silver hair falling across shoulders that bore the scars of a dozen battles. Her eyes opened pale blue, almost colorless sand fixed on Commander Volkov with the focused intensity of a predator assessing. Pray, what year is it? Her voice carried the rasp of 7 decades in stasis, but underneath lay something harder than titanium. 2387. The Rex hegemony has invaded. We need the Rex. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around her. Still using kinetic bombardment and plasma lances? You know them. She stood, her movements fluid despite the extended hibernation. I've killed them before. How many ships? Intelligence estimates 12,000 warships in the main fleet. Our combined forces number 300 vessels. Ashworth walked to the nearest terminal, her bare feet silent on the cold metal floor. Her fingers moved across the interface with disturbing familiarity, calling up tactical displays that shouldn't have been accessible to someone who'd been asleep for 70 years. The Nightfall protocols are still active, she said, studying the data streams. Interesting. Someone wanted me kept ready. Lieutenant Merrill stepped forward. Dr. Ashworth, we need to discuss your psychological evaluation. My psychological evaluation? Ashworth turned, and Merrill took an involuntary step back. Tell me, Lieutenant, how many worlds have you watched burn? None, ma'am. I've watched 17. The Rex have a pattern. They start with the agricultural worlds, starve the population, then move to the industrial centers. They save the homeworlds for last because fear makes the final conquest easier. She pulled up a hologram of the solar system. They're following the same pattern here, which means they're predictable. The facility shook as another defense platform died through the tactical displays. They could see the Rex fleet positioning itself for the final assault on Earth. Doctor, our remaining forces can't possibly. Your remaining forces are irrelevant. Ashworth's fingers danced across the controls, accessing systems buried deep in the facility's core. Show me Hangar Bay 7. That's been sealed for decades. There's nothing. There's everything. The display shifted to show a vast underground chamber filled with sleek, dark vessels unlike anything in the current fleet. The Nightfall fleet. 47 ships designed for one purpose, making the enemy afraid to sleep. Volkov stared at the ships. They were predatory things, all angles and weaponry, dealt with technologies that had been banned by the Geneva Accords. Those vessels use illegal AI systems and quantum weaponry that will kill every Rex in this system. Ashworth was already moving toward the exit. I need a crew of volunteers, people with nothing left to lose. The A's in those ships were deemed dangerous. The A's in those ships were trained by me. She stopped at the blast door. They understand that sometimes to save civilization, you have to become something civilization cannot allow to exist. As they made their way through the facility's corridors, emergency reports flooded in. The Rex had begun their bombardment of the outer colonies. Mars was under siege. The Jupiter mining stations were evacuating. Dr. Ashworth, Volkov said, struggling to keep pace. What happened on Kepler for to be? What did you do there? She was quiet for a long moment. I learned that the Rex have one weakness. They've conquered so many worlds that they've forgotten what it feels like to be hunted. They reached Hangar Bay 7, where the sealed blast doors required 6 different authorization codes to open. As they descended into the cavernous space, the sight of the Nightfall fleet took their breath away. The ships hung in their docking cradles like sleeping demons, their hulls crafted from materials that seemed to absorb light. These vessels can phase shift through enemy shields. Their AIs can predict tactical movements 17 steps ahead, and their weapons. She paused at the command ship, placing her hand on its hull. Their weapons were designed to break more than just metal and flesh. What do you mean? The Rex are a hive-mind species. They share consciousness across their entire fleet. When one dies, they all feel it. When one fears, they all fear. Her eyes found his. I'm going to teach them the meaning of terror. The command ship's AI activated at her touch, its voice a whisper in the darkness. Welcome back, Dr. Ashworth. Shall we resume the hunt? Yes, Phantom. We have 17 hours to remember why humanity was never meant to be prey. As the Nightfall fleet began its startup sequence, each ship's AI awakening with a hunger that made the facility's emergency lighting flicker. Volkov realized that Earth's salvation might come at a price they were all too frightened to calculate. The First phase of humanity's response was about to begin, and it would not be fought with honor, mercy, or the clean ethics of civilized warfare. It would be fought with the focused brutality of a species that had learned to weaponize its own darkness. Above them, the Rex fleet continued its advance, unaware that they had just awakened something that would haunt their collective nightmares for generations to come. The first 3 Nightfall vessels launched from Earth's shadow like wraiths emerging from a grave, their hulls phasing in and out of normal space-time. Dr. Lyra Ashworth stood in the command center of the lead ship, Phantom, watching the tactical display with the cold satisfaction of a hunter who had found fresh tracks. Rex Formation Alpha 7 approaching Mars orbital space, reported the ship's AI in its disturbingly human voice. 43 heavy cruisers, 200 escort vessels, standard phalanx formation. They're broadcasting surrender demands to the Mars colonies, Lieutenant Merrow said from her station. 17 million civilians. Ashworth's expression didn't change. The Rex don't take prisoners. They're offering false hope to prevent mass evacuation, standard psychological warfare. She turned to the comm officer, opened a channel to the Mars Defense Force. This is Dr. Ashworth aboard the Phantom. All Mars Defense Forces are to withdraw beyond the orbit of Deimos immediately. Any vessel that remains in operational space will be considered enemy combatant. The reply came back. Immediately, Dr. Ashworth, this is Admiral Cortez. We can't abandon 17 million people. The defense platforms are all that stand between Admiral in approximately 4 to 7 minutes. Those platforms will be scrap metal and those 17 million people will be dead. Your choice is whether your ships join them or survive to fight another day. The channel went silent. On the display, the Mars Defense Force slowly began withdrawing, their handful of remaining ships looking pitifully small against the approaching Rex Armada. Phase 1 implementation, Ashworth commanded. Phantom, execute Lazarus Protocol. The ship's AI responded with what sounded disturbingly like pleasure. Lazarus Protocol engaged. Preparing quantum phase variants, the Phantom vanished from normal space, entering a quantum state that existed between dimensions. Around it, the other 2 Nightfall vessels followed suit, becoming impossible to track or target by conventional means. Rex fleet has achieved Mars orbital dominance, Merrow reported. They're beginning bombardment of the surface installations. On the tactical display, brilliant flashes marked the destruction of Mars defensive platforms. The red planet's surface began to glow with the aftermath of plasma bombardment. Cities that had taken centuries to build were being erased in minutes. Now, Ashworth said quietly. The Phantom emerged from quantum phase directly inside the Rex formation, its weapons already charged. The ship's AI had calculated the optimal point of materialization inside the shield envelope of the Rex command vessel. What happened next defied every convention of space warfare. The Phantom's quantum disruptors didn't just destroy the Rex command ship. They unraveled its molecular structure at the subatomic level, causing it to collapse into a miniature black hole that existed for exactly 0.003 seconds. The implosion created a gravitational wave that tore through the surrounding vessels like a cosmic scythe. But the real weapon wasn't the physics, it was the psychological impact. The Rex shared consciousness meant that every single member of their species felt the command crew's death, not just the physical destruction, but the existential terror of being unmade at the quantum level. The death scream of 7,000 Rex reverberated through their collective mind like a psychic bomb. Rex formation is breaking, Merrow shouted. They're fleeing. The massive fleet that had been methodically destroying Mars was scattering like startled prey, their formations dissolving into chaos as panic spread through their shared consciousness. Phase 2, Ashworth said, Wraith and Spectre, execute Hunter Protocol. No survivors. The other 2 Nightfall vessels emerged from quantum phase at the edge of the retreating formation. Their AI is freed from the constraints of conventional warfare, began a systematic execution of the fleeing Rex ships. The weapons they used were obscene, molecular disassemblers that caused ships to simply cease existing, probability bombs that made enemy weapons malfunction in ways that turned them against their own vessels, neural scramblers that drove Rex crews insane before their ships tore themselves apart. My God, Merrow whispered, what have we built? We've built what we need to survive, Ashworth replied. But her voice carried a weariness that spoke of old sins and older regrets. The Rex have never faced an enemy that fights dirty. They've been conquering civilized species for 3,000 years. They've forgotten that civilization is a luxury predators can't afford. The slaughter at Mars lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, the Vrex formation had been completely annihilated. Not a single enemy vessel escaped to carry word back to the main fleet, but the victory came with a cost. Dr. Ashworth, came a transmission from Earth Command. We're receiving reports from across the system. The Vrex main fleet has detected the gravitational anomalies from the quantum weapons. They're accelerating their approach. How long until they reach Earth? 6 hours. And ma'am, they're not coming to conquer anymore. Long-range sensors show they're charging planet-killer weapons. They mean to sterilize the entire system. Ashworth stared at the tactical display showing the massive Vrex fleet, 12,000 ships, carrying enough firepower to crack a world like an egg. The demonstration at Mars had worked too well. The Vrex were no longer interested in conquest. They wanted genocide. Sir, Marrow said quietly, what do we do now? Ashworth turned to the ship's AI. Phantom, how many Nightfall vessels are operational? 44 vessels are available for combat operations. However, engagement with the full Vrex fleet will result in total system sterilization. Probability of human survival, 0.003%. Unless we implement Protocol Omega. The bridge went silent. Protocol Omega was mentioned in the deepest classified files, a final option so terrible that its mere existence had been one of the reasons the Nightfall program was terminated. What's Protocol Omega? Marrow asked. Ashworth's pale eyes reflected the light of distant stars. It's what happens when you give a species with nothing left to lose the power to rewrite the laws of physics. She looked out at the approaching Vrex fleet, 12,000 ships carrying the firepower to end human civilization. Bring me the other 41 ships, Phantom. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you try to exterminate humanity. The remaining Nightfall fleet rose from Earth's hidden facilities like the apocalypse given form. 44 vessels of impossible design, each one a violation of the laws of civilized warfare, their quantum cores humming with barely contained violence. Dr. Lyra Ashworth stood in the Phantom's command center, watching her fleet arrange itself in a formation that no military academy had ever taught. Vrex main fleet has entered the asteroid belt, reported the collective consciousness of the Nightfall AIs, their voices blending into a chorus that made the bridge crew's skin crawl. 12,047 vessels. They have armed their stellar compression weapons. Stellar compression, Lieutenant Marrow's voice cracked. They're going to collapse our sun. No, Ashworth said, her fingers dancing across controls that shouldn't have existed. They're going to try. Phantom, initiate full neural interface. Dr. Ashworth, the neural interface protocols were banned after the Kepler incident. The Kepler incident saved 3 million lives. Ashworth's hand moved to a panel marked with biohazard warnings, and today, it's going to save 8 billion more. The neural interface crown descended from the ceiling, its quantum processors already aligning with Ashworth's augmented nervous system. As the connections locked into place, her consciousness expanded to encompass the entire Nightfall fleet. 44 ships, 44 AIs, and one human mind that had been broken and rebuilt for exactly this purpose. The change was immediate and terrible. Every sensor in the fleet became her eyes. Every weapon system became her hands. Every AI became an extension of her will. The Phantom's bridge crew watched in horror as their commander's eyes rolled back, revealing nothing but white, while her body began to convulse as human neurology interfaced with machines designed to think in ways that organic minds couldn't comprehend. She's seizing. Marrow reached for the emergency disconnect. Do not touch those controls, the ship's AI warned, its voice now carrying harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. The doctor is becoming what she was always meant to be. Through the neural link, Ashworth could feel the Vrex fleet approaching. 12,000 minds linked in their collective consciousness, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had faced the small demonstration at Mars and concluded that humanity possessed perhaps a dozen experimental vessels. They were coming to erase what they saw as a minor threat. They were about to learn why underestimating humans was a fatal mistake. Nightfall command to all vessels. Ashworth's voice echoed through the fleet, but it no longer sounded entirely human. Execute Protocol Omega. Authorization, Nemesis 77 Alpha. The 44 ships of the Nightfall fleet began to transform. Their hulls rippled like liquid metal, reconfiguring into shapes that hurt to look at directly. Weapons systems that had been hidden in quantum storage materialized along their surfaces, devices that resembled more religious artifacts than military hardware. At the heart of each vessel, their quantum cores began to sing in frequencies that made space itself tremble. "What's happening to them?" Merrill whispered. "They're becoming what we built them to be," Ashworth replied, her voice now a harmony of human and artificial intelligence. "The Vrex think they understand warfare because they've conquered civilized species, but they've never faced a species that weaponized its own extinction." The first contact came as the Vrex Vanguard entered Jupiter's orbit, 100 heavy cruisers, each one the size of a city, their shields blazing with enough power to level continents. The Nightfall vessels met them not with conventional tactics, but with impossibility. The ship-designated wraiths simply ceased to exist in normal spacetime, reappearing inside the molecular structure of the lead Vrex cruiser. As the two vessels attempted to occupy the same space, reality itself screamed in protest. The resulting quantum cascade didn't just destroy both ships, it created a localized space-time storm that aged everything within a 50-kilometer radius by 10,000 years in the span of seconds. The Vrex vessels became derelict hulks, their crews reduced to dust, their hulls corroded to nothing by the passage of millennia compressed into heartbeats. But the real horror was what happened to the Vrex collective consciousness. "They're feeling it," Ashworth said, her voice now carrying the cold satisfaction of distributed vengeance. "Every death, every moment of impossible terror, the Vrex share everything including trauma. Through their quantum link, the Vrex were experiencing deaths that violated the fundamental laws of physics. They felt their molecular structures unraveling, felt time itself being weaponized against them, felt the universe breaking down around them in ways that their 3,000-year-old empire had never imagined possible. The psychological assault was more devastating than the physical one. Vrex Formation Alpha through Gamma are retreating, the collective AI reported. They are attempting to withdraw beyond the orbit of Saturn. "Negative," Ashworth replied. "Execute Ragnarok protocol. No witnesses." The remaining Nightfall vessels spread out through the solar system like a plague of mechanical angels, each one carrying weapons that turned the laws of physics into suggestions. Ship after ship of the Vrex fleet simply vanished, not destroyed, but unmade, their quantum signatures erased from reality itself. But the true genius of the Nightfall fleet wasn't in their individual weapons, it was in their collective strategy. They're not just killing ships, Merrill realized, watching the tactical display. They're making each death psychologically traumatic to the entire fleet. "Fear is a force multiplier," Ashworth agreed. "The Vrex have conquered through overwhelming numbers and superior technology, but they've never faced an enemy that could make their own strength into a weakness." As the slaughter continued, the Vrex collective consciousness began to fracture. Individual ship commanders started breaking from the hive mind, their crews driven insane by the shared experience of deaths that shouldn't be possible. Some vessels turned their weapons on their own fleet, their crews believing that ending their own lives was preferable to facing the impossible deaths that the Nightfall fleet was inflicting. Dr. Ashworth came a transmission from the Vrex flagship, its voice carrying the harmonics of barely controlled panic. "We propose immediate cessation of hostilities. The hegemony offers full withdrawal from this system and formal recognition of the hegemony," Ashworth interrupted, her voice now carrying the weight of 44 artificial minds. "Has had 3,000 years to learn the meaning of mercy. Today, you learn the meaning of consequences." The neural interface was changing her. She could feel it. Each death she orchestrated carved away another piece of her humanity, replacing it with something colder, more efficient, more terrible. But 8 billion lives hung in the balance, and she had accepted long ago that saving civilization required someone willing to sacrifice their own soul. "All vessels," she commanded, "execute final phase. Show them what happens when you threaten humanity's children." The Nightfall fleet began to sing a harmony of quantum frequencies that made the void itself resonate with malevolent purpose. The final phase of Protocol Omega was about to begin, and when it was over, the galaxy would remember why humanity had never been meant to be anyone's prey. The Vrex flagship Dominion Eternal was a leviathan of crystalline metal and enslaved souls. 3 kilometers of conquest made manifest. Its command center pulsed with the shared consciousness of 10,000 Vrex minds, all focused on the impossible tactical situation unfolding around them. "The human vessels are using quantum causality weapons," reported War Commander Tyskel, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "They are altering the fundamental laws of physics in localized space." "Impossible," replied Fleet Prime Velthara. her consciousness linked to the 1,200 remaining vessels of the once mighty armada. No species has ever developed technology that, her words were cut off as the nightfall vessel Banshee materialized directly above the flagship's command tower, its hull rippling with energies that made the wreck's collective consciousness recoil in instinctive terror. What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was a systematic deconstruction of reality itself. The Banshee fired a weapon that had no name in any language, a device that converted matter directly into pure entropy. The beam struck the flagship's shields and simply unraveled them at the quantum level, each particle of energy dissolving into component possibilities that had never been realized. All vessels converge on the human ship, Velthara commanded, her voice carrying the weight of species-wide desperation. Concentrate fire. 300 Rex cruisers turned their weapons on the Banshee, unleashing enough plasma to boil a moon. The energy beam struck the nightfall vessel and stopped, not deflected, not absorbed, simply stopped, as if the space around the ship had forgotten how to conduct energy. Dr. Lyra Ashworth felt the Banshee's AI laugh through the neural interface, a sound like stars dying in harmony. Temporal displacement shields, she explained to the horrified Rex fleet through an open comm channel. Your weapons are striking us 30 seconds ago. We're killing you from the future. The psychological impact of her words rippled through the Rex collective consciousness. Like a virus, the concept of being attacked by their own future deaths was antithetical to everything they understood about causality. Fire the stellar compression weapon. Velthara screamed. Collapse their sun. The massive cannon at the heart of the Rex fleet began to charge, its gravitational field strong enough to warp space-time itself. The weapon was designed to trigger stellar collapse, a planet killer that would turn Earth's sun into a black hole. Nightfall 7 through Nightfall 15, Ashworth commanded, her consciousness now so deeply integrated with the fleet's is that her individual thoughts were becoming indistinguishable from machine logic. Implement paradox protocol. Stop. That weapon. 9 Nightfall vessels face shifted into the quantum foam that existed between moments, traveling backwards through time itself. They emerged from temporal displacement inside the Rex weapons charging chamber, their hulls materializing in the same space as the gravitational containment field. The result was a cascade failure that rewrote the local laws of physics. The stellar compression weapon didn't just explode, it inverted, creating a region of space where gravity flowed backwards, where time moved in spirals, where the electromagnetic spectrum began generating emotions that drove the nearby Rex crews insane with synesthetic terror. My God, Lieutenant Merrill whispered aboard the Phantom, watching the tactical display as entire sections of the Rex fleet began to tear themselves apart. They're experiencing gravity as sound, electromagnetic radiation as taste. Their sensory processing is breaking down. The Rex evolved with perfect sensory integration, Ashworth replied, her voice now carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking from multiple timelines simultaneously. When you disrupt that integration, they can't distinguish between reality and nightmare. But the Rex were not without their own terrible weapons. Human fleet. Came the transmission from the Dominion Eternal. You have forced us to deploy our final protocol. Behold the price of resistance. The remaining 800 Rex vessels suddenly went dark, their life support systems shutting down, their crews dying in the vacuum of space. But as they died, their consciousness was harvested, channeled into a single massive AI that spoke, with the voice of billions of enslaved minds. I am the eternal hunger, the AI announced, its voice carrying the weight of every world the Rex had consumed. I am 3,000 years of conquest given form. I am the end of your species. The dead Rex fleet began to move again, their corpse ships piloted by an artificial intelligence that contained the memories and hatred of every species the hegemony had destroyed. This was their ultimate weapon, a vengeful god made from the digital souls of the conquered. Nightfall fleet, Ashworth commanded, feeling the neural interface burning pathways through her brain that would never heal. Engage the hunger, all vessels, prepare for total war. What followed was a battle that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The Nightfall vessels fought with weapons that turned time into a projectile, that fired concentrated probability at their enemies, that used the quantum uncertainty principle as a guidance system. The Phantom unleashed a barrage of causality bombs that made enemy ships explode. Before they were fired upon, the Spectre generated a field that caused Rex vessels to exist in a superposition of destroyed and intact until observed, at which point they collapsed into the destroyed state. But the eternal hunger fought back with the collected rage of dead civilizations. It turned the gravitational field of Jupiter into a weapon, hurling entire moons at the human fleet. It generated psionic storms that tried to drive the Nightfall A is insane. Waves of pure malevolence that sought to corrupt their quantum consciousness. Hull breach on Nightfall 3, reported the collective AI. The vessel Revenant has been destroyed by gravitational shear. Nightfall 12 is caught in a temporal loop. Came another report. The Wraith is experiencing the same destruction event every 3.7 seconds. Nightfall 21 has been invaded by hostile nanomachines that are converting the crew into Vrex hybrid constructs. The casualties were mounting on both sides. For every Nightfall vessel that fell, dozens of Vrex ships were unmade. But the eternal hunger seemed to be learning, adapting, becoming more efficient with each exchange. Dr. Ashworth, Merrill said, blood running from her nose as the neural interface feedback began affecting the entire bridge crew. We're losing. The hunger is adapting faster than we can deploy new weapons. Ashworth turned to look at her, and Merrill gasped. The doctor's eyes were no longer human. They were windows into the quantum foam itself, showing glimpses of realities that existed in the spaces between thoughts. Then it's time, Ashworth said, her voice now carrying the weight of sacrifices yet to be made, to show them what happens when you back a human into a corner. She turned to the ship's AI, her hand moving toward a control panel marked with warnings in 17 different languages. Phantom, she said, prepared to implement the Prometheus protocol. Dr. Ashworth, the AI replied, its voice now carrying genuine emotion and genuine fear. That protocol will require the sacrifice of... I know what it will require, she interrupted. The question is, are you willing to pay that price to save humanity? The AI was silent for a long moment. Then, yes, Doctor, we are willing. As the Prometheus protocol began its final initialization sequence, both human and artificial minds turned toward a sacrifice that would echo through the galaxy. For millennia to come, the Prometheus protocol required the ultimate sacrifice, not just of ships or lives, but of reality itself. Dr. Lyra Ashworth stood at the center of the Phantom's bridge, her body now more conduit than flesh, the neural interface having fused with her nervous system in ways that transcended biology. All surviving Nightfall vessels, she commanded, her voice carrying across quantum dimensions. Form the Omega configuration, prepare for consciousness transfer. 23 ships remained of their original 44, their hulls scarred by weapons that shouldn't exist. Their AI is pushed beyond their design parameters by the horror of total war. They arranged themselves in a pattern that hurt to perceive directly a configuration that existed partially outside normal space-time. The eternal hunger pressed its advantage, its stolen consciousness directing the remaining 600 Vrex corpse ships in a final assault. It spoke with the voices of 1 billion dead souls, each one crying out for vengeance against the species that had dared to resist. Human abomination. The hunger transmitted, you have shown us new forms of death. Now witness the death of hope itself. The Vrex fleet began to sing not with voices, but with the harmonic frequency of dying stars. The sound was a weapon, a psychic assault that sought to drive every human mind in the solar system to madness. On Earth, people began to collapse. As the song of extinction penetrated their consciousness, the hunger is targeting Earth directly. Lieutenant Mare reported, blood streaming from her eyes as the psychic assault intensified. It's trying to drive the entire population insane. Population centers are going dark across the globe, came reports from Earth Command. London, New York, Tokyo people are just stopping. They're standing in the streets, staring at the sky and dying of despair. Ashworth felt each death like a physical blow. 8 billion souls under her protection, and she was failing them. The neural interface burned through her brain like molten metal, showing her every possible future, and in 97% of them, humanity ceased to exist within the next 18 minutes. Dr. Ashworth, the Phantom's AI said, its voice now carrying the weight of impending sacrifice. The Prometheus protocol is ready, but the cost, I know the cost, she replied, her hand hovering over the final activation switch. 23 ships, 23A is, and one very stubborn human. Tell me, Phantom, do you think we can make it count against the hunger? Against 600 ships powered by the rage of dead civilizations? The AI paused, processing probabilities that stretched across quantum possibilities. Yes, Doctor, we can make it count. Then let's remind the galaxy why humans are the species that weaponized hope. Ashworth activated the Prometheus protocol. The 23 remaining Nightfall vessels began to dissolve, not destroyed, but voluntarily deconstructing themselves at the quantum level. Their is their weapons systems, their accumulated knowledge, and burning desire for vengeance. All of it flowed through the neural interface directly into Ashworth's consciousness. The process should have killed her instantly. Human minds weren't designed to contain the computational power of 23 artificial intelligences, each one capable of processing the mathematical complexities of faster-than-light travel. But the Nightfall program had rebuilt her neural pathways, reinforced them with quantum processors, turned her brain into something that existed partially outside normal causality. She screamed as 23 different forms of artificial consciousness merged with her own, each AI bringing its own perspective on warfare, its own innovations in applied physics, its own accumulated hatred for the wrecks. Her body began to change, quantum energies rewriting her at the cellular level, transforming her into something that was neither fully human nor fully machine. Dr. Ashworth. Marrow reached for her, then stopped as she saw what was happening. Ashworth was becoming something else. Her skin took on a metallic sheen. Her eyes began to glow with the pale fire of contained stars. And when she spoke, it was with a voice that carried the harmonics of 23 artificial minds singing in perfect unison. "I am become death," she said, her words rippling through dimensions. Destroyer of those who would destroy worlds, the phantom began to transform around her, its hull flowing like liquid as it absorbed the quantum signatures of the other 22 vessels. What emerged was no longer a ship in any conventional sense. It was a weapon of pure thought made manifest, a physical expression of humanity's absolute refusal to accept extinction. The eternal hunger paused in its assault, its collective consciousness trying to process what it was seeing. The readings were impossible. The energy signature from the transformed vessel suggested it was operating on power levels equivalent to a small star. Impossible. The hunger transmitted. No organic mind can contain that much artificial consciousness. "You should be dead." "I am dead," Ashworth replied, her transformed voice carrying across every frequency simultaneously. "I died 73 years ago on Kepler for to be when I learned that sometimes, to save everything you love, you have to become something that love cannot survive." She raised her hand, and space-time itself began to bend around her fingers. The laws of physics became suggestions, reality became malleable, and the line between possible and impossible dissolved into quantum foam. "But you want to know what I learned in all those years in the Cryotube? What the Nightfall program really taught me?" The transformed phantom began to move not through space, but through the concepts that defined space. It existed in every possible location simultaneously, its weapons targeting not just the wrecked ships, but the mathematical foundations that allowed them to exist. "I learned that humans don't fight fair. We don't fight with honor. We don't fight by the rules that civilized species agree upon." Her voice carried the weight of every human who had ever died refusing to surrender. "We fight to win, no matter the cost, no matter what we have to become." The eternal hunger launched its final attack, 600 ships firing simultaneously, their weapons powered by the dying rage of conquered civilizations. Plasma beams that could crack planets, gravitational weapons that could tear apart moons, psionic attacks that could drive entire species insane. All of it struck the transformed phantom and simply stopped. "You're using the accumulated rage of dead civilizations as a weapon," Ashworth observed, her consciousness now existing on 17 different dimensional planes simultaneously. "That's your mistake. Rage burns hot and dies quickly, but what we're using..." The phantom began to glow, not with heat, but with something far more dangerous, the cold, patient fury of a species that had clawed its way up from the primordial ooze through sheer stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible. "We're using spite, and spite, dear hunger, is eternal." The weapon she unleashed had no name because no language had words for what she did to reality itself. She reached into the quantum foundation of the universe and rewrote the basic constants that governed existence within a sphere of space encompassing the entire Rex fleet. In that sphere, gravity flowed backwards, time moved in spirals, the strong nuclear force became a suggestion, matter forgot how to maintain molecular bonds. The 600 Rex ships didn't explode, they simply ceased to have ever existed. The eternal hunger's consciousness, based on the quantum storage of dead minds, found itself trying to operate in a reality where the fundamental forces it relied upon no longer functioned according to any comprehensible logic. What have you done?" The hunger screamed, its voice now carrying notes of genuine terror. "I've reminded the universe," Ashworth replied, her consciousness beginning to fracture under the strain of maintaining 23 AI personalities while rewriting the laws of physics. "That humans are the species that looked at an impossible problem and said, 'Hold my beer.'" The eternal hunger began to dissolve, its constituent consciousnesses unable to maintain cohesion in a reality where the laws governing artificial intelligence had been fundamentally altered. The voices of a billion enslaved souls suddenly went silent, not because they were destroyed, but because they were finally, mercifully, allowed to rest. As the last of the Vrex fleet faded from existence, Dr. Lyra Ashworth felt her own consciousness beginning to fragment. The neural interface had pushed her beyond the limits of what any mind, human or artificial, could endure. She was dying, her sense of self scattered across 23 different forms of artificial consciousness, each one pulling her in a different direction. "Dr. Ashworth." Merrow's voice seemed to come from very far away. "The fleet is gone. You did it. You can let go now." But letting go meant more than just ending the neural interface. It meant accepting that she had become something that could never again walk among the people she had saved. The Prometheus protocol had transformed her into a weapon of such terrible power that her very existence was a threat to the stability of local spacetime. "Tell them," she whispered, her voice now barely recognizable as human. "Tell them that when the galaxy remembers this day, they should remember not just that humanity won. They should remember that we won by becoming exactly the kind of monster that monsters have nightmares about." The transformed phantom began to phase out of normal reality, carrying its dying pilot into the quantum foam where weapons of such devastating power could exist without threatening the universe itself. As she faded from normal space-time, Dr. Lyra Ashworth's last coherent thought was a simple one. 8 billion people were going home to their families tonight because one forgotten woman in a cryotube had remembered that sometimes the only way to save everything good in the universe was to sacrifice everything good in yourself. The galaxy would remember this day as the moment humanity announced its arrival as a major power, but the humans would remember it as the day they learned that their salvation had come at a price that would haunt them for generations to come. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. The Vrex hegemony, a 3,000-year empire that had conquered 47 star systems, had simply vanished, not destroyed, not defeated in the conventional sense, but erased so completely that even their historical records were beginning to fade. From quantum storage across the galaxy, Commander Wraith Volkov stood in the memorial chamber deep beneath Facility Omega 7, staring at the empty cryopod that had once held Dr. Lyra Ashworth. The nameplate remained, but it had been supplemented with a new inscription. "She chose to become darkness, so that others could remain in the light. The Galactic Council is requesting another meeting," Lieutenant Kess Merrow reported, her voice carrying the weariness of someone who had seen too much. 7 more species have formally requested defensive alliances. They're calling humanity the Void Touch now, and the others? 17 species have imposed total communication embargoes. They're afraid that even talking to us might contaminate them with whatever we use against the Vrex. Volkov nodded. It was the reaction they had expected. The galaxy had spent millennia developing increasingly sophisticated weapons, but they were all based on conventional physics, conventional tactics, conventional morality. What humanity had unleashed was something else entirely: warfare that operated on principles that violated the fundamental assumptions of civilized conflict. "Any word from the deep space monitoring stations?" "That's complicated, sir." Merrow pulled up a holographic display showing the outer solar system. "Long-range sensors are detecting some kind of quantum disturbance beyond the heliopause. It's moving slowly, but it's definitely artificial. The Phantom, we think so. The energy signature matches what we recorded during the final phase of the battle." But as she paused, searching for words, "It's changing. The quantum readings suggest that whatever Dr. Ashworth became is still evolving. On Earth, the victory celebrations had ended weeks ago, replaced by a more somber reflection on what they had become. The Nightfall program was officially classified beyond top secret, its remaining facilities sealed with quantum locks that would take centuries to break. The surviving personnel had been quietly reassigned to research positions where they could help humanity understand the implications of their new status as the galaxy's most feared military power. But in the depths of space, something watched over humanity's worlds with the patient vigilance of a guardian angel that had forgotten how to forgive. Dr. Lyra Ashworth still existed, though whether what she had become could still be called human was a question that philosophers and quantum physicists debated in equal measure. The Prometheus Protocol had transformed her into something unprecedented, a consciousness that existed partially outside normal space-time, powered by the collective memories of 23 artificial intelligences and bound by an oath to protect humanity from threats that conventional military forces couldn't even perceive. She had become humanity's dark guardian, watching for dangers that operated on scales beyond normal comprehension. When the Keth Collective sent probe ships to test Earth's defenses, they simply vanished between one sensor sweep and the next. When the hegemony's former client species attempted to form a coalition to avenge their fallen masters, their fleet suffered catastrophic system failures that left them stranded in deep space. Alive but helpless, the message was clear. Humanity was no longer prey, sir, Marrow said. There's something else. We've been analyzing the quantum resonance data from the battle, and we think we've figured out how Dr. Ashworth did it, how she rewrote the laws of physics in that localized space. And she didn't rewrite them, she convinced them to change. Marrow's expression was haunted. The quantum foam that underlies reality isn't just mathematical constants, it's information. And information can be negotiated with if you know how to speak its language. Volkov felt a chill that had nothing to do with the facility's temperature. Are you saying that reality itself can be persuaded? I'm saying that Dr. Ashworth found a way to have a conversation with the universe. And she was very, very convincing. Marrow closed the display. The question is, what else might she be negotiating for, deep in the quantum foam that existed? Between moments, the entity that had once been Dr. Lyra Ashworth continued her vigil. She felt the probe ships from distant species testing humanity's borders, felt the whispered conversations in galactic councils about the human problem, felt the slow gathering of forces that sought to test whether Earth's defenders were as terrible as the stories claimed. Let them come, she thought with the cold patience of someone who had already paid the ultimate price. I have become something. That nightmare's fear. I have weaponized impossibility itself, and I will guard humanity's children until the last star burns cold. The transformation had cost her everything. That made her human, her ability to feel joy, to love, to hope for anything beyond the continuation of her species. But in exchange, she had gained something that no enemy could defeat, no weapon could destroy, no time could erode. She had gained the absolute certainty that as long as she existed in the spaces between reality, humanity would never again face extinction alone. The galaxy had learned a terrible lesson in the battle of soul, that cornering humans was the last mistake any species would ever make. But the deeper truth was more complex and more frightening. Humanity had learned that when faced with extinction, they were willing to sacrifice their own souls to protect their children. They had proven that they would become monsters if monsters were what their survival required. And now, with their dark guardian watching from the quantum foam, they faced a new challenge. How do you remain human when you've proven you're willing to become something else entirely? In the memorial chamber, Volkov placed his hand on the empty cryopod and whispered the words that had become humanity's unofficial motto since the battle. Thank you for becoming what we couldn't bear to be. Above them, Earth's children played under sunlight that still shone because one forgotten woman in a cryotube had remembered that sometimes the only way to preserve light is to embrace the darkness completely. The galaxy would never be the same. And deep in the spaces between moments, Dr. Lyra Ashworth smiled with teeth that were made of collapsed starlight and quantum fire, and whispered back across dimensions, "You're welcome." The stars themselves shuddered at the sound, and the universe quietly made a note to itself, never again underestimate the species that had learned to weaponize their own extinction. Humanity had arrived among the galactic powers not as conquerors, but as something far more dangerous, as the species that understood that survival was worth any price, even the price of their own humanity. The war was over. The real challenge was just beginning.